Showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
Welcome, Salt Lake Cityans. Welcome to episode 95 of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. My name is Chris Hollifield. I want to personally welcome you to my show. Welcome to the podcast where I showcase locals, professionals, everyday people in Salt Lake City, Utah that I believe are making the city what it is today. First of all, I want to thank everybody. It's been 1 year. 1 year ago, I started this podcast. It was just an idea. I started recording it with an iPhone, and look at what it's turned into today. Just an idea to talk to people in Salt Lake City, find out their stories, find out what they're doing to make the city what it is, and look at where it's come. And I have so many people that I'm grateful for and thankful that they've helped me along the way, helped me turn this podcast into what it is. 95 episodes. Hard to believe that I've put that out over the last year. I've come so far, and so many people have helped me along the way. So thank you, everybody. You know who you are. Too many people to name, too many people to list. Thank you for your support, your tweets, your donations, your text messages, your emails. All of that is what's helped me get to where I have brought this podcast today. Got so many plans over the next year. It's hard to believe that we're coming on year number 2 of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. So thank you very much. IamSaltLake.com is the website where you can find out more about the podcast, about me. You can link up with me on Facebook, Twitter, the voicemail line, all right there online. So check that out, IamSaltLake.com. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Mediocre Radio Network. This episode, really great episode. I sat down with Kristin Hodson. She is the founder of the first woman's specific mental health clinic here in Salt Lake City. She's a co-author of a book called Real Intimacy, A Couple's Guide to Genuine, Healthy Sexuality. She was also on the Radio from Hell, X96 Radio from Hell. She did the Sex Girls. I'm going to jump into that in 2 seconds. But again, thank you, everybody, for your support. Thank you for your love. Thank you for everything. Let's jump into that conversation that I had with Kristin Hodson as we talk about sex and intimacy. You're involved with so many different things.
Yeah.
I'm going to have you kind of introduce yourself.
Okay.
And just kind of go down the list of everything you're involved in, and then we'll kind of even
Pull from those. So
why don't you kind of start with a little introduction about yourself?
I'm Kristin Hodson, live in Sandy right now, BYU Hawaii grad. I'm pretty proud of being able to live on the North Shore for 2 years and do my school and actually graduate. A lot of people wonder how I could live on the North Shore and actually finish school. But that was fun. Made my way back to Utah, pursued my master's in social work. And then from there, worked at the University of Utah ER, which I loved working and doing psych triage and doing all of that. That was one of my favorite jobs. And then from there, got pregnant, decided I wanted to do the mom thing and had some experiences in there that we can get into if you want. And then decided to go into private practice and specialized in pregnancy and postpartum and women's issues. And then was given the opportunity to write a book. So wrote a book. It's been a year now, and that was called Real Intimacy.
Since you've written the book, it's been
okay. Yeah. In fact, this month is the anniversary of it, and then I from there have now kind of forged a path of talking about sex and being a female Mormon that talks about sex in Utah.
Kind of like what's that online Ruth?
You talk about Dr. Ruth.
Dr. Ruth.
Yeah,
you're kind of like a Mormon Dr. Ruth.
Kind of like that.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And you're on Radio from Hell. Do you do that?
Yeah,
still?
Yeah. We were on Radio from Hell for a bit. It was a fun run. We're not on there right now.
Okay.
But we were on there for about 6 months taking live calls, which is where we got the name, the Sex Girls, which we've held true to that because it's actually my sister. She's also the co-author of the book and she's a coach. So I'm a therapist. She's a coach and we talk about sex together.
Does it get awkward a little bit? Doing it with your sister?
No, that's the thing is I realized that maybe I should feel awkward, or I've gotten so comfortable with sex, and in our family growing up, it just is not an issue. So I've realized with a couple of things that we've done lately that I'm so much more open, and I don't realize it compared to other people.
So your sister and you were on Radio from Hell, and you would take live calls. Let's kind of start even there a little bit, since we're kind of talking. I'm interested because you're doing it with your sister. What were some of the calls about? Like, give me an example or make up an example of what
we got
a
some
common
great
calls. I mean, what were they ever really awkward or what? Like what?
You get some calls where, they were awkward. And fortunately, you have Carrie, Bill, and Gina that they're fantastic, and they deal with randomness all the time. I mean, I think Radio from Hell is kind of random and quirky and on the fringe a bit, but we would get questions about, gosh, I could give you a whole laundry list, but penis size. How do I
like what is a good penis size?
Yeah. Or he's not big enough. What do we do with this? How do we make this work? And having to give different kind of positions and recommendations.
How do you answer that?
You would just go down the list of like, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Here's some recommendations. And it's kind of, there was one episode where it was like power hour, where we were getting texts, we were getting calls, we were getting emails, and we were just blasting through questions. And that was a fun episode. Actually, that was one of my favorites.
And you guys should do a podcast about sex.
We actually were going to do one with Gina, but there were some things that happened that we weren't able to do that, but we're working with Richie to try and figure something out on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely listen to that. I mean, I think
would you?
I think we're all interested in are we good in the bedroom? Is our partner really telling us the truth?
Right.
You know, because it's like, how do you know if they're telling you? I mean, okay, that was good. You
right.
know, and you don't know. I mean, okay, I'm asking you now. I mean, how do you know if they're lying? You don't, I guess, right?
No, and that's really, if you have a relationship that's trust, based on trust, then hopefully you would have an idea that you're both showing up as your authentic selves. But there's really, I mean, you can't mind read. So
why would you consider yourself like a sex expert? I mean, did you take classes for this? I mean, how do you become a sex expert?
How do you become a sex expert? That's a great question. I feel like somehow all of the bring it into personal meets professional, because I had somewhat of a wild childhood.
Okay.
Started off pretty early.
You grew up here in Utah, right?
Grew up here in Utah.
Yeah.
Went through active LDS to not active. Had a big stretch in there where I wasn't active.
I think most. Yeah, that happens.
Needed to kind of push away and figure out who I was, and went down a pretty wild path for a while. And so I had a lot of personal experience. And then I had a friend one time when I was starting to do therapy, and she's like, you get all the clients that have sexual issues. And most of the beginning was sexual trauma, sexual abuse, rape, all of that. And then from that, it's also evolved into, you get a lot of LDS and Mormon intimacy issues, desire issues, sexual compatibility, women not knowing about their clitoris, like some anatomy issues. And so it's kind of evolved from personal, flowed into my professional. And then I was like, I guess I'm just doing this thing. So right now I'm about halfway through my ASECT certification, which is the biggest kind of board for sex therapy counselors, educators.
Wow, that is awesome.
So I'm just kind of making it official.
Do you find it, I mean, especially, you know, since this is a Salt Lake City based podcast. Yeah. Do you find that Mormon couples have more problems in the bedroom than non-Mormon couples? Or is that fair without, I mean, not really picking on
I would say different issues, maybe different issues.
Not picking on a religion.
Yeah.
Really, but
conservative faiths, I'd say.
Okay, there we go. Conservative faiths, because they're maybe afraid to say what they like or don't like.
Yeah, and so I think there's a lack of education.
That causes problems.
Mm-hmm. That, and they don't know how to talk about it. They don't know kind of basic how their body works. There's also, in not just LDS faiths, but conservative, kind of the taboo of what you can and can't do. And so they're like, oh, we can't do that. And then they find out maybe they can, or they want to, and how do you resolve that and bring that into your relationship? How do you work through one person wanting to try something and broaden their sexual repertoire? How do you do that? So I would say LDS couples come with different issues, but My practice is filled with different. Yeah, no.
But
I think that's a worthy question.
LDS is obviously the dominant faith here in Utah.
Yeah.
You could say the same thing about another religion, probably, and another very conservative.
Catholics are pretty conservative. They have a lot of rules about sex and intimacy.
And do you find that? Because actually, I know a Catholic here in the area. There's certain rules in their faith, but it's like they know they're breaking them, but they just kind of do it anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a bit different, and I think the culture here
I know Catholics are against birth control, and which makes it difficult. I don't know what the Mormon stance is. To be honest with you on that,
they actually don't have a stance. They put it back on the couple to figure out what works for them.
What works for them, which I think is probably the better stance. I mean, and not to even get too much into that. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's what the kind of talks and the kind of conversations you have. So, do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. What's been interesting is we've done this. So the book came out a year ago.
And the name of the book is?
A Real Intimacy, a couple's guide to genuine healthy sexuality.
Okay.
Since then, none of the traditional kind of mainstream Mormon media, they haven't really given us the time of day. It's been all the non-Mormon.
And what do you mean the time of day? They just haven't even acknowledged, not even made a comment.
No. Not even necessarily interested or showed any interest that this is an LDS book on sex and intimacy. There's really.
So it is an LDS book. It is.
Mm-hmm. We were approached to write it from an LDS perspective. Now the principles in it apply. I mean, you could take that LDS lens off and the principles apply in general.
Okay.
But it does have that lens. But, no, we've gotten picked up. Like we've had some of our best interviews have come from non-LDS media. Like we just did an interview on KRCL Radioactive. It was a great interview because they didn't bring any assumptions or things to the table. So they were just so curious. So we got to really flesh that out. But it's been interesting when we've gone to expos or things like that. People they won't come and kind of own that they're interested or want to talk or have questions. But it's been the behind the scenes that we get tons of emails, the callers on the radio, people reaching out, wanting information, but publicly, not yet.
What's the premise of the book? Talk about that.
How do you negotiate and deal with sexuality in your relationship? And we talk about things pretty blunt and directly. We had a chapter that couldn't be published. So you can find that on our website, which was considered kind of the controversial material, which isn't too controversial in actuality. But I think for our culture, it's kind of pushing the bounds a little bit. But the premise is, okay, you can have all these books that tell you all these ideas. And you're like, yeah, that would be great. Okay, how do I now go talk to my spouse about this when we've had countless amounts of fights, or it's just kind of an awkward topic for us? Like, what do we do with this information? Because I think people read self-help books and they agree with it. They like it, but then they don't know what to do with it from there.
Yeah.
They're just kind of stuck.
Yeah.
So that.
And you wrote it with two other people, right? Who were the other people?
So the one was Alicia, which is my sister.
Okay.
And then the third his name's Tom Harrison, and he has been a psychotherapist here in the Salt Lake Valley for almost 35 years. And I've known him for, how old am I? I've known him for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
So when we were approached, I approached him and said, would you be interested in doing this?
So you were approached to write the book. This wasn't just like, okay, I want to write the book and then sell it.
No. And because the timing, I had a 5-month-old, like brand new baby. And I had
how many kids do you have?
I have 2.
2 kids.
Yeah. I've got almost a 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. But so her name's Penny. She was 5 months at the time. And I would put my kids to bed. My husband was also traveling every week to Arizona, Tuesday through Thursday. So I'd put the kids down and then I would write from like 7:30 to 1 every night because we only had 4 months to write it. So the timing was less than stellar, but it just was what it was. And we rolled with it and put it out there, knowing that it would be the beginning of something. And a year later, I've already changed so much that I wished we had a chance to now go rework the book, but that's kind of I think that is how it is with most creative people. Like I was listening to some of your earlier podcasts.
Oh, geez.
And I think with Richie, where you're like,
embarrassing.
whoa, the first ones, you're totally different now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about my book, where I'm like, oh, I wish there's certain things I could tweak a bit, update, revise.
But it's
just kind of the name of the game,
you know, and figuring out who you are, what you're about, how to, you know, your voice. Absolutely. So the book's about a year old. Yeah. And I mean, what's been the response like? What's been the public response like?
The response has been a slow, steady burn, I think.
Okay.
It just keeps going. And fortunately, we keep getting different media opportunities. Like the City Weekly thing was pretty cool that we did last week, and hoping something comes of that we're kind of talking about.
And when you say something comes about, like, what do you want?
We would love to do like a weekly sex aska type deal and
like maybe a column or something.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah, that would be really, really fun.
Do a podcast. Nobody reads anymore. Everybody listens.
They do listen. And if I knew how to do a podcast, I would. And this is
let's
something
do a podcast together.
We should. Here's what I learned is, as a therapist, I don't think I'm incredibly funny or entertaining necessarily.
Yeah. Well, you don't need to always be funny.
But that's why Radio from Hell worked so well, is because you had Carrie, Bill, and Gina that bring that to the table, mixed with the therapist and the coach, and together it was pretty entertaining and pretty good. And I think if I were doing a podcast just solo, I would need like you take Richie or someone like that to pull in that other element to lighten it up, or I could get pretty heavy pretty quick.
We'll talk when we're done recording. We'll talk when we're done recording.
Okay,
because
that sounds good.
I got some ideas.
They're floating around.
They're floating around in my head. So you can get the book online. You can get it at local Barnes and Nobles or
Barnes and Noble, Deseret Book, Amazon.
Does King's English and it'll local?
I don't think it's in King's English or any of the local.
Just because I try to support local myself.
Absolutely.
You know,
I don't think it's in there. I don't know. That's not one of the places I've heard. It'd be cool if it was in there. You know, maybe you should go check there, ask them if they have it, and tell them to get their book in their store.
And then you're the founder of the first women's mental health clinic here in Salt Lake. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that. Actually, okay. I mean, the first.
So you have the U of U Women's Resource Center. Okay. So they do great things. They've been around for a long, long, long time. But what ended up happening is when I got pregnant with my first child, I had major anxiety. And at that point in my professional development, I was a generalist, and I had the clinic that I was working for at the time. They're like, why don't you, like, who are you as a therapist? I'm like, I don't know. I just am a generalist. I have no idea. And I wanted to know who I was, but I couldn't force it. It's not like I could just say I was something, because if I'm going to spend my time working, I've got to bring some passion and want to really invest my time in that. So I was a generalist. So during my pregnancy, I had a lot of anxiety. But
don't you think that's common in pregnancy?
It is so much more common than I had any idea, but no one told me. So I was freaking out a bit. And fortunately, I had an awesome midwife who really helped me and would let me listen to the baby's heartbeat all the time, which really helped. I was actually going to be doing a home birth at that time. And so I had access to a midwife that would come over and help me. And through the course of events, I have a pretty small body, so I get pretty big when I'm pregnant. And they kicked out some ribs. And so I was having to go to the ER
The baby kicked out some ribs.
Yeah. Wow. So I was going into pre-labor contractions, and it was just a mess. So we transferred care.
You were planning on having it at home, but because of that is what caused you to have it at a regular hospital.
Yeah, I transferred care. And I have to say, my sister has 7 kids. So baby number, which one was it? It was like 6. I think it was 5 or 6. I lose track. But I got to go watch her. She home births. And so at this point, she is a seasoned birther. Yeah. And so I go and watch her, and she's an introvert, and it looks like she is just zenning out. And I'm like, I can do that. If that is birth, are you kidding me? I can do that. Not at all what I thought. Like, she just was pro and good at it and knew what was going on. And that was not my experience.
Well, I was born at home, actually. And
were you?
This was back 35 years ago.
Yeah.
When it wasn't popular.
Right.
You know, so props to my mom for doing that whole thing.
Absolutely.
And my sister-in-law, all of her kids, and my sister as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I come from a family of home birthers.
There you go. Welcome.
Welcome. Yeah. Kind of that hippie side, a little bit.
It's kind of a hippie shout out. But
so anyways, you were suffering with this anxiety.
So I had this anxiety, and fortunately I transferred care. I really needed to be in a hospital. I was terrified to become a mother. Terrified. Not scared of labor, but I was never anyone that loved babysitting or eager to have kids. That just wasn't me. So I labored naturally for 24 hours. And finally, my sister came to the hospital, and I had kind of the little sister syndrome of wanting to do this right. And my sister was just bombarded by husband and all these people saying, tell her to get an epidural. Did it. 7 hours later, I deliver my son, and it was fantastic. He got here healthy, happy. And at the time I asked my midwife, I remember saying, is there anything up I should know about postpartum depression? And she's like, well, you can either take medication or pull up your bootstraps. I was like, I'll pull up my bootstraps. I come from kind of an athletic background. So if someone says to be tough, that's what I'll do. Yeah, I'll be tough.
But don't you find even in Utah, they push that medication a little bit more than in other states? That's what I hear.
Well, yeah, if you look at the research, we are pretty high on the antidepressant scale. And
yeah.
So
I didn't know if that had anything to do with it. It was like, oh yeah, here's a nice dosage of Prozac.
I think sadly, it was more of our attitude toward and lack of knowledge around postpartum depression and maternal mental health. I think it was kind of that because this was almost 5 years ago now. And so I think it spoke to that a little bit more. So here I am, and I'm kind of dealing with some postpartum OCD. I was so in my head, and along the birthing spectrum of birth experts, you have people that are like, oh, let them cry it out, do their thing, all the way to the attachment parenting. And they're 100% contradictory to each other, and they're both certain they're absolutely right. So I was stuck in this, reading everything I couldn't put books down, and it almost just paralyzed me to where I couldn't parent. I was just stuck, and I had some of these images that came along with it, and
what was your husband? Was your husband pretty supportive? Was he freaking out too, or?
I think he was like, both of us are new parents that we have no idea if this is normal, if this is just what parenthood is. Like, welcome to parenthood. We have no idea. So finally I had a good friend at 3.5 months that kind of stepped in and helped me know what was going on and pointed me to some websites and some resources that changed my life. So at this point, I'm like, well, if I'm a therapist and I had no clue what this is, I have no idea where to get help. How are people that don't know how to navigate kind of the mental health world, social support, how are they going to get help? How are they going to even know what it is if we're not naming it or calling it out? It is what it is. So that's how the healing group was born.
Which approximately the time of this?
That was 2009.
Okay.
So I worked at the ER. I had to go back to work when my son was 8 months. I worked at the ER, and while I was at the ER, I was doing the healing group and creating it. So the healing group started with party of one. Like, I was the group, and I was renting office space from Tom and just seeing per client. But I was the first person that was specializing like hard niche in maternal mental health and women's mental health. And I knew immediately that's what I wanted to do, what I was supposed to do. And you don't get training for this in grad school. Oh. No one ever, there's no section on women's mental health or maternal mental health, even though statistically speaking, if you're working with women in your practice, this is going to come up. And that's a whole another ball of wax for me with the social justice of not knowing anything about this, about maternal mental health. But, so that's what it was born out of. And
so do you have quite a bit of women that you're working with now?
So it went from party of one to I have a 2,300 square foot space out in Midvale, and fortunately get to work with 10 awesome therapists that now we all specialize in women's mental health, sex, pregnancy, and postpartum, and infertility, relationships, marriage counseling, general mental health, transitions. And so it's grown a lot. Yeah. It's been really satisfying. And I never in my wildest dreams thought it would grow this much. But my craft, my hobby is I love marketing and business and kind of the entrepreneurial. I was the girl that was going door to door that you hated because I was selling you stationery. I was coming up and saying,
as a kid.
Yeah.
Sounds similar to me.
I was always coming up with these little businesses and had my first business when I was 19 it started off as Utah Hair. And I owned all the 48 states, and I would market stylists before the internet was kind of booming.
Yeah.
And stylists could they could come up with their own custom domain, have their profile where you could go and see what kind of hair they did, blah, blah, blah. And that was a bad business story. Went south.
Went south.
Yeah.
So back to the healing group.
Yeah.
And we'll mention this at the end again, but since we're on that subject, how can, if somebody's listening, how can they find you guys? I mean, a website or a phone number?
Both. We have.
Share that right now.
Thehealinggroup.com, and our phone number is 801-305-3171.
Okay.
And so you can call us. We do 15-minute consultations. If you're not sure what you're dealing with, you can email us and we respond really well. We also are we're super client-centered and want people to find the right fit. We know we're not a fit for everybody, but we kind of view therapy as dating. You have to find the one, and we want to help you try and find that one so that
the right therapist.
Yeah.
And how many therapists did you say you had again that were working out of that location?
We have
you
10.
Might have mentioned that.
Total 10.
Okay, 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ranging. We have a good spectrum of people that work for us that kind of cover everything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you guys do events too? I noticed, or was that that website that you did events, or I was noticing you had an event coming up in September.
Yeah, that's our On the Edge of the Bed.
Edge of the Bed.
Tastefully Sexy workshop for women at the Hotel Monaco.
There you go with that sex again, right?
There it is. I can't leave it alone. Yep. But that's going to be a 6-hour workshop. Gina Barberi is going to come at the end, but it's going to be fun.
And is she a sex expert?
She's not, but I think she's glomming on. I think she thinks it's fun. I think she likes.
See, and I wish I've had her on the show. You know?
Have you?
And I wish I would have known that. I would have picked her brain a little bit.
Yeah. Gina's just, I think, very cool. And obviously it has her pulse on a lot of things because she does the radio. So she's kind of savvy with a lot of things.
Well, she's got her own family.
Yeah.
Is that tough to juggle all this with a family as well and a husband?
It is.
Or, I mean, is your husband pretty supportive with?
Yeah, he's really supportive. And I kind of, I work on MST time, which is Mama Standard Time. Okay. So, which means kids go to bed and I'm doing a lot of my time from 9 to 12. And then my husband and I are very deliberate with how we spend our time. So we have our weekly date nights. We have our actual, sorry, babe, but we have weekly erotic date nights as well, so that we just can plan that.
Do you think that, I mean, it's probably important. Do you think that, I mean, okay, so back to even all the sex talk. What does your husband think of all that? Like that you talk about that so much?
So he's a pretty introverted guy.
Yeah.
We're pretty different in that regard. He met me when I was almost graduating. So he kind of knew what he was getting into a little bit. I don't think he knew that I would ultimately end up specializing in sex, and I'm really comfortable. He's definitely warming up, and he's a trooper.
Okay.
He's not like my biggest fan when it comes to talking about sex, but he's warming up and generally getting more and more comfortable with it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would say that's kind of, I've got a few people out there that are big time advocates that are my male friends. And we get a lot of people that are like, oh, we need more people talking about this, especially women. But I think it also makes a lot of people uncomfortable that we can just talk so freely about it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we kind of steered a little bit from the event, back to the event. So it's September 14th.
September 14th.
And what are people going to find at it? I mean, because people can still sign up to come to it, right?
Yeah, they can sign up until seats fill up. They can sign up until the very day of, but I think it'll fill up before then. There's 100 seats available. We're about halfway sold out at this point, but we haven't really started our advertising. We start our big advertising about 2 weeks before. They are going to learn basic anatomy, how their bodies work. They're going to learn a lot of women deal with desire issues, how to put sex and intimacy back to the top of the to-do list. They're going to learn new tips and tricks to enhance the spiciness and the hotness of their relationship. We're going to be having a happy hour, and we're going to have a physical therapist come in and talk about the anatomy of an orgasm. And we're going to be having someone that's going to come in and make non-alcoholic specialized drinks during that, which will be fun. And then we're doing big giveaways, Hotel Monaco night, a hotel night, Corridor massage for 2. We've got tons of giveaways.
And it's probably pretty safe. It's for women only.
Yeah. And that's why we're doing it, because we've actually had a lot of men where they're like, are you going to do this for men? Can we come?
Are you going to do it for men?
If we get enough interest,
myself.
If we got enough interest, we'd absolutely do it. If we could spend majority of our time doing this is what we'd do.
And have you done quite a bit of events?
This will be our first one.
First event.
First one. Yeah.
So September 4th, and they can find it on the Healing Group website.
Yeah, or they can go to Eventbrite. If they just Google On the Edge of the Bed Eventbrite, it'll pull up there. We have a website that we don't really monitor a whole lot called askthesexgirls.com. They can find it there. They can find it on realintimacybook.com. So we've got a few websites that scatter things.
Awesome.
But the Healing Group's the easiest way to find it.
And that's probably the easiest way to even find yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. Doing all the projects that you doing, and what would you say some of the most challenging things have been that you've had to face?
The biggest challenge, I think, has been balancing being a faithful LDS member.
Mm-hmm. And why is that? Why is that? Just out of curiosity. Because
there's some things I struggle with like with the culture and kind of our approach to sex and intimacy. And so that I think I can come across sometimes when I express my frustration that I'm a church hater, when I'm not at all. I just am frustrated a bit with some of the messages that get put out there and what keeps getting perpetuated. And so that's been difficult. Also, the postpartum depression piece, that's been, in some regards, I felt like a lone ranger, because in the medical world right now, it's still, I feel like we're just barely scratching the surface, and that's been okay. It's been a good challenge. But those have been my two biggest challenges, is knowing that we're on the right path, but it's not as though we're getting lots of validation from the masses, on a public level. Behind the scenes.
So would you like to see on a public level them to come out a little bit more?
I think it'd be fantastic. That would be the dream.
Do you think that the LDS Church ever will?
I don't know. They're making good changes, I think. Like, I think it was big that they don't have any, when we were writing our book, we didn't find any, I think there's a lot of taboo of, oh, well, this person said you can't have oral sex, or no, you can't do this, or whatever. Mm. But really, when you really research it, the church has basically said, it's up to you. Like, you're the stewards over your relationship. And I think that's fantastic.
Well, especially probably even with the Mormon church, obviously.
Yeah.
If you're married.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? If a married couple,
yeah,
what they do behind closed doors should be their business.
Exactly. Because it's all so different. It's also relative. You can't really do a blanket statement that's going to apply to all the relationships out there. You really can't. There's so many circumstances that it would be impossible to lay kind of these blanket rules. But I do think some people would just love the playbook, the how-to, and not have to take ownership and really grapple with that and not have the hard conversations and not face that in the relationship. I think they would love to default.
It's sad, though.
It is sad
that there is that.
But it'd be a lot. I think that feels safer and easier to people to say, "Oh, we can't do this because so and so said so." No, we can't.
Yeah.
When it's really hard, it's a lot harder to go, I don't know if I want to do that, and I'm going to have to own that. And now what do I do with that? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for our relationship? How do we negotiate this? How do we resolve it? That takes a lot more work, like relationships. It's far easier to just have someone tell you what you can and can't do.
What would you say the percentage of failed marriages are due to their sex life?
It's the number 2 reason for divorce. You've got sex and money.
Really?
Yep.
Really?
Sex and money. And so I think So
it's important to I mean, even educate yourself, like with your classes,
yeah,
and listen to what books and
yeah. Yeah, and we get clients that will come in and say, who pays someone to help them have better sex? And we're like, more people than you know, and try to frame it that sex is a skill like anything else, that somehow when we get married or not married, whatever, that you're in your relationship and suddenly you should just know how to do it. And that's just not the case. When you look at how most people were educated, their parents gave them like maybe one talk or none, or basically said, "You good? You know,
well, and
this?"
I think even that is changing.
Somewhat.
Someone like myself, where I was born in the 70s.
Yeah.
I was going through my teen years in the 80s. And obviously that was a very hush-hush topic. Now,
yeah, we would have been educated through MTV.
MTV, there you go.
I don't know if that even exists now.
It does, but they don't do music videos.
I was going to say, it's not music anymore.
Not music videos.
No.
So I think parents nowadays, I mean, we're the new parents.
We're the new, exactly.
And so I think we're realizing, where did we get screwed up, and what would we have liked our parents to educate ourselves with? I
see that a lot more with our generation.
For our children. Mm-hmm. And do you think it's healthier, though, to be as exposed to sex as
I don't think we have a choice now. Yeah. I don't think we have a choice because there already is so much exposure out there. They're through social media and internet. And I mean, kids have phones, like I wouldn't let my kid have a smartphone till I don't know what they'll have by the time we're faced with that.
Some of the pictures that I hear that they share is ridiculous.
Yeah. And there's so much technology at their disposal that they don't know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we have a choice anymore. The choice really is, do you want them to be educated through porn, friends, the media, or do you want to teach them?
Well, see, and I even know that with myself, where it was like, okay, I'm not getting educated. So it was like, I felt like I needed to learn somewhere. And maybe my outlets weren't the best outlets. But I think if a parent does offer some sort of education, your kids might not be as wandering.
Yeah.
What does little Bobby have this video all about, or something, and
it's really like,
I think you could save a lot of problems.
And it becomes so not taboo and that they're rebelling. It's just like, oh yeah, I know I have access to that. I know what that is. My parents have talked to me about it. And I mean, I'm a big proponent that sex education starts from the minute your kids are born. Uh-huh. Really. Like, I remember when my little boy was in the tub and he was beyond excited when he saw that his penis grew. And it was his first, probably not his first direction, but one that he noticed. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, come check out my penis." I'm like, "Isn't that awesome? Your penis will grow and it'll shrink." And that was it. Like, he didn't need more information. We didn't have to go into detail. It was age appropriate, simple. But in that moment, I planted the seed of, that's not off topic for me. It's not as much what you say. I think a lot of it is how you respond. Sometimes it's just if you don't know how to respond, it's taking a deep breath and not reacting and figuring out how you want to handle it. But I think waiting now for sex education to be when you're 8, 12, no, it doesn't start then. You gotta,
but not make it gross or, it is what it is.
It just doesn't have to be loaded. It's just your body, but I think our generation, I think it's up to us to really challenge what we were taught and where we're uncomfortable and resolve that so that as we're teaching our kids, we can give them a much better experience, because there is so much out there. And I feel like that's the best way to combat it and develop healthy, sex positive kids where they become kind of sexual agents. And they're like, I'm choosing to do this, and it's intentional, it's deliberate, whatever path they go, but it's intentional.
And back to, I asked you what the most challenging thing is.
Yeah.
What would you say some of the most rewarding things are? You've kind of been mentioning some of the different rewarding things of what you do has done for yourself.
Working with clients and seeing the progress in their relationships.
Have you seen marriages turn around?
Oh yeah. Really? Yeah. I have seen people that have but the papers have been signed. They haven't been taken down to the courtroom and they turn it around.
Really?
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Well, and I don't take full credit for that.
But you have to take a little bit.
But those are the satisfying moments of like, okay, we did this. And seeing clients come back that they're excited that they tried something and they're like, that worked and this was a game changer. And or people pushing their growth edge and being willing to kind of risk when they come from really traumatic or painful backgrounds, being willing to just confront it. I think that's really scary. And I really admire people for doing that. That is really satisfying. I love to be in the trenches with people. And I feel like it's a privilege and an honor to be there.
I could imagine.
Yeah. And, we've gotten some emails. We got an email from a guy that he was my dad's generation. So he had been married 40 years. And he said that our book totally changed his marriage. And he had conversations that he had never been able to have and kind of change directions with his relationship. And that was really humbling. And so it's stuff like that. As a therapist, you don't always get that. Sometimes you'll have someone that 4 years later says that really helped. And sometimes you're just planting seeds and you don't really get to see your impact on somebody, if any. And sometimes you have days where you're like, I suck as a therapist. And so it's those rewarding moments that
with any job.
Yeah, that's true.
There's
that's true.
Days where you're just like, I can't do this. Or
Yeah.
I'm not good. And I mean, you got your own issues to even deal with. I'm
Absolutely.
Sure, with either your own marriage or your own personal life.
Yeah. And I never, as a therapist, I never feel like I'm the expert and that I'm God and I know that person better than they know themselves. I like to work collaboratively. And I kind of feel like the moment I feel like I've arrived is the moment that I will totally be done and fail. Like that's it, the end, game over. So I try to always continually seek out more information and learn and grow, and that I'm never in a position to think that I have made it.
So you were born and raised here in Utah, right?
Mm-hmm, I was.
Back to that. I always, kind of a change of subject here.
Yeah.
As I bring people on the show. I'm always curious. What do you like about Utah? What do you like about Salt Lake City?
I love the access to all the recreation. I'm a big outdoors girl. Always have loved snowboarding, cycling. To me, those are biggies. And so to have access to that, really being like 20, 30 minutes away. I like the music scene. I think the music that we get here is fantastic.
The local bands?
Yeah, the local stuff.
What local bands do you like?
Local meaning I love
just like concerts that come through.
Yeah.
We get some great.
We get
compared to some others.
The Twilight series. I will never forget when Modest Mouse. I think it was one of the first ones of the Twilight season, and it was free. And I was like, this is going to be a disaster. I always wonder, I kind of speculate who was the wizard behind the curtain on that, because I'm like, really? Was it like a 60-year-old that's like, oh, Modest Mouse, they would be great. But learned
Twilight gets some amazing bands.
They do. And once they started, I went to that Modest Mouse concert and it was insane. I mean, we were seeing people jump the fence and like pull, it was crazy. So we ended up leaving a bit, and I've heard, now that they charge, it's changed a bit. I think they're charging $5 or $10.
$5.
I think that makes a big difference.
It does. And so far I've been at every one this year.
MGMT is coming.
Yeah,
they're the final, right?
I don't know the lineup by heart.
I'm excited.
Belle and Sebastian was the first. I don't know if you listen.
Yeah.
To, oh my gosh, they're one of my favorite bands, and it's just like, how do you get these big? And I know the city is pulling a lot out of their pocket, to fund this, and it's really amazing that a city does something like that. I don't know. I mean, there probably is other cities that do it. And I know that the $5 probably helps them out a little bit, but I think the idea was to kind of weed out just the people that are going to just kind of hang out and drink beer, and stuff like that.
I would say that's the other thing, Salt Lake's investment into the arts.
Oh,
I think
it's
pretty amazing, and that's something I really, really enjoy. And I just think we have really amazing artistic people here. I like the vibe, and I love that about our city.
Did you ever think about going back to Hawaii after going to school there?
I think about it every day.
You think about it every day?
Wished my dream would be to move there and just teach at BYU Hawaii. And it's awesome because when I was there, I drove a $300 pickup truck that was just ghetto. Shopped at the thrift store because it just wasn't a big deal. Like materialism, there isn't any there. And just to be by the water, I'm a water girl. I did competitive wakeboarding for a while in
California. I grew up down there.
Yeah. See, if my closest thing would be California, I would do it. I just need to be by the water. But I try and figure out every single day how I can get back there. My husband's not a humidity guy, but he has told me that at one point he would do 2 years. I'll take it.
2 years, go to Hawaii. Has he been to Hawaii?
Yeah.
Does he like it?
He does.
Besides the humidity.
Yeah. If it weren't for the humidity, I think he'd be a lot more game. It's not a great place to raise little kids at all. But yeah, I would love to get back there. So
back to Salt Lake. Would you change anything about it? What would you like to see different about Salt Lake City? If anything, I mean, maybe there's nothing you would like to. Maybe you're fine with. I would
love to see, honestly, a little less emphasis. I don't know if this is even possible, and I realize this happens in other states where you have dominant religion. A little less polarization, like kind of what team are you on? Where are you? Because I feel like I'm a bit in the middle. Like I have,
and that has to be a little awkward sometimes. Does it get uncomfortable?
Well, it surprises people. Like my business partner isn't Mormon, and my best friend growing up isn't Mormon, and I have a ton of Mormon, non-Mormon friends. It's not an issue for me. But some of the non-Mormon people I meet, they're kind of surprised and maybe pleasantly surprised to kind of figure out where I am. But I would love to see a bit more, a little less emphasis on what camp are you in?
Yeah.
I feel like it's really polarized.
Alienating people that might not be Mormon. And I think that's even why the whole counterculture of, the non-Mormons, it's like they fight back so hard.
Yeah.
And I even find that frustrating myself, where it's like, why can't a Mormon just be a Mormon? Like you go to some other areas and a Lutheran is a Lutheran and,
right.
and a Catholic is a Catholic, where it's not so much where I feel like they have to police everybody else.
Yeah. And I get it. I mean, I completely get it. When you look at our governmental body and you look at, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But if I could have one wish, is that we would just
all get along.
Yeah. Let's just all get along.
Yeah. And we talked about do you listen to podcasts?
I do.
What are some of your favorite podcasts?
Yours. I like yours.
Well, thank you.
I like The Cultural Hall.
Great podcast.
I like, and I'm going to blank on it now that you're asking me.
Yeah.
This American Life.
Okay.
I like that one a lot. I like Mormon Stories. I think John DeLen's done a good one with that. Those would be my top.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I even ask myself, I listen to so many podcasts.
Do you?
And I'm always looking for new ones.
Uh-huh.
And even recommendations for people listening, because sometimes people find a podcast and they don't even realize all the other ones out there.
Right. Yeah. No, that's very true.
And
what are yours?
Oh, I really enjoyed This American Life. I listened to WTF with Mark Maron. There's the Mediocre Show.
Mm-hmm.
That's out east. And an offspring of that, obviously Oblivious. They do that. There's a podcast called The Nerdist. I listen occasionally that one, depending on who they interview.
Yeah.
Then I listen to Radio West.
I love, I kind of have I don't even know Doug Fabrizio, but I kind of have a side crush on him.
I don't always get to all of those, depending on what the topic is.
Yeah.
Radio Lab, any of the NPR, all the music, All Things Considered, or something like that.
So that's where I spend a lot of my time, is NPR and KRCL.
Yeah.
That would be my indulgence.
There's actually a podcast you might enjoy, being a therapist. One of my favorite ones, the Mental Illness Happy Hour.
Oh,
with Paul Gilmartin.
I'll check that out.
Yeah. And I really, really love it. He does interviews a lot of times with well-known people.
Interesting.
And talks about, different struggles they've struggled with. He reads, anonymous emails and great podcast.
I'll listen to that.
Check it out. Mentalpod.com.
Mental Pod.
I'll write it down for you.
Okay.
You really got to check it out. Probably
I will.
I look forward to it the most.
Cool.
I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I listen to it and I say, wow, these people are that screwed up. I'm pretty normal,
Makes you feel normal. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, do you have a motto or piece of advice that you would leave with people that listened?
Is to live intentional.
Yeah.
Be deliberate. I think oftentimes people get in a groove and they just go with the flow, and they haven't even stopped to question if that's the flow they want.
Yeah.
So I'm all about living deliberately, and I think that changes people's lives in a major way.
And how can people find you?
You can go to thehealinggroup.com. You can email me at Kristin, Kristin, at thehealinggroup.com. But thehealinggroup.com is kind of the window to access. You can find me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I'll try to get all the links on the show notes and all that on the IamSaltLake.com website, so people can check you out. And you're on Twitter. I didn't even realize that.
I'm a tweeter.
You did an reply at me. I'm like, oh, look at this.
I'm here.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on the show. Best of luck with all your stuff.
Thank you.
And you got a cool thing going.
Thanks.
And
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So thank you. Many thanks goes out to Kristen for coming on the podcast and sharing her story. Hopefully you guys enjoyed listening. TheHealingGroup.com is the website. You can find out more about her. I'm going to put all the links at IamSaltLake.com/95. I'm going to put all the links for all of the different projects she's involved in. That way you can get in touch with her and reach out and let her know you heard her on the I Am Salt Lake podcast. A few ways you can support the show. If you do any shopping through Zag, if you are in the market for a Zag Spark or the Invisible Shield for your iPhone or your smartphone, click on that banner. You get free shipping. They throw a few nickels our way, helps keep the podcast going, helps keep it alive. Also, any iTunes reviews is much appreciated. If you haven't left a review for the podcast, click on that iTunes link on the website. Leave us a review. That helps boost our ratings and gets us exposed to more people, and more people find out about the show. And I cannot thank you enough for that. If you would like to be a guest on a future episode of the podcast, drop me an email, iamsaltlake@gmail.com. Let me know what you're up to. Let me know what's going on. If you're doing any events over the next few months, I'd love to bring you on the show and share what's going on in Salt Lake City. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. I Am Salt Lake, so make sure to follow me there. You can find all of the links for that on the website as well. Got a lot of really cool things coming up as we creep into the second year of doing the I Am Salt Lake podcast, so you're going to want to make sure to not miss a single episode. I'm here Monday and Thursday. Again, my name is Chris Hollifield. That's going to do it for episode 95. Thank you so much for listening. You guys have a great day, a great evening, and a great week.